All right, hello. It looks like most folks who the waiting room has been cleared. Will continue to admit others as they come. But hi, I'm Philissa Cramer, JTA's editor-in-chief, and I want to thank you all for choosing to be here with us today. When we first invited you to this conversation, we said very clearly we may not know anything then. Obviously, we as a country know more than we thought we would at this time. We do know who has won the presidential election. We also have information we uh, didn't have last cycle about how Jews voted. And we have, of course, information about what we know the president-elect, Donald Trump, has done in the past as president and has said he will do in the future, that we can discuss. So we have some answers. We'll share them with you, but we know there are lots and lots and lots of questions still. It's a big time of major change. We've experienced those together before. I'm seeing lots of faces that I recall in times of massive change, of course, in the pandemic last year when Israel was attacked. And I just want to thank you again for choosing to come together and unpack the news with us. Let me share who else we have here. I've got a few questions for each of our team members. You all sent in questions, which we appreciate. Some of them have been answered because you sent in questions before we knew what the results would be. And I want to invite you to share whatever questions you do have today. You can post them in the chat and they will make their way to us, and we will try and get as many questions answered as possible. Actually, before I introduce everybody, I will just say in the questions that everyone shared, I think we really saw the diversity of perspectives within our American Jewish community. We had questions from folks who were very, very afraid about what would happen if either candidate won, right? Like questions from folks who were very afraid of a Harris presidency, questions from folks who were very afraid of a Trump presidency. We saw fears about Israel, but also fears about all kinds of other issues that are important to American Jews. And so again, I'm grateful that we have a community that contains a wide range of perspectives that reflects the community that we cover and the community that we are trying to inform. So we have here with us three people I'm sure you know. We have Ron Kampeas, JTA's Washington Bureau Chief, who he'll tell us about how many rounds of presidential elections he's covered, but this is not his first, and we are also lucky to learn from him and his insights. We also have Ben Sales, our news editor, and Andrew Lapin, a senior reporter who is sitting in Michigan, a state that we were all watching very closely last night. So thank you to all of you for being here. Ben, I want to start with you and just ask you, let's just kind of set the terms here. What do we know about how American Jews voted? And how is that different from what we've known in the past?
Thanks, Philissa, and thank you everyone for being here. So in terms of the Jewish vote, there's been a lot of attention paid to this, both by Jewish organizations and rank and file Jewish voters, and also the presidential candidates themselves, who have both looked into this and polled it. And Donald Trump actually talked about it from the stage at one point at a rally. And that was actually helpful to us because we know what he was shooting for. So historically, as I'm sure a lot of people know, the vast majority of Jewish voters have voted for the Democratic presidential candidate in basically every election dating back, I think at this point, more than a century or a century. The high watermark for the Jewish Republican vote share, the highest number of Jews that have voted for a Republican, or the highest percentage, came in 1980, when around 40% of Jews voted for Ronald Reagan. Besides that, and especially in the past few decades, it's been closer to like a 75-25 split or like sometimes it's 80% of Jews voting for Democrats and 20 voting for Republicans. Sometimes it's 70-30. And so what we saw this year, what first of all, what the Trump campaign I know hoped for this year was that a combination of the fallout from Hamas's October 7th attack and the surge of anti-Semitism here in the United States, and a number of other factors would kind of would all lead to a historic number of Jews or a historic proportion of Jews voting Republican. And what Trump said from the stage a couple months ago is that he saw polling that 40% of Jews were going to vote Republican. So that it would be a 60-40 split, right? So like 60% of Jews voting Democrat and 40% voting Republican. And had that happened, that would have been historic. That would have been tying or maybe even exceeding the largest share of Jews the Republican candidate has ever gotten. Based on the polls we saw yesterday, that is not what happened. There are two reliable exit polls aren't always reliable. Sometimes they change. Sometimes they're a little misleading in the light of day. But there are two credible exit polls that measured the Jewish turnout or the Jewish vote rather. And one of them, which was called the National Election Pool, is kind of a consortium of publications that does an exit poll, found that the Jewish split was 79% for Kamala Harris, the Democratic candidate, and 21% for Donald Trump. And so if that was the share, then that's basically in line with the way Jews have voted, at least since the early 90s and beyond. And it would actually be a little less than Trump got in 2016. And depending on what surveys you looked at last year, also not really an improvement over last year. Another poll by the Associated Press and Fox News, which obviously Fox News is a right-leaning network, but the polling is considered credible. Found better numbers for Trump. It found it found the split was 66% for Harris and 32% for Trump. So if that's the case, that's a little bit better of a showing for Trump than we've usually seen. But neither of them found the 40% mark. The last thing I just want to say about this is that overall, these numbers are the Jewish community overall has continued to favor Democrats in large numbers in this election and past elections, no matter which of those stats is the right one. But the exception to that within the Jewish community is the Orthodox community, which for the past 2 decades, and especially since Trump began his first campaign, have just trended very solidly Republican. And in poll after poll leading up to this election, we saw that the vast majority of Orthodox Jews plan to vote for Donald Trump. And I'm sure when we see detailed precinct level data of this election, we're going to find that Orthodox neighborhoods across the country are red, even in seas of blue in New York and Los Angeles and other places.
Yeah, and I'll just add that so in 2020 we didn't have this kind of data because the sampling wasn't adequate to break down the national poll into a Jewish subgroup. So, but what we do have in the Fox News and AP poll this year is state level data. So the poll that shows the 79% looked at 10 competitive states. It didn't include New York or California, where many Jews live. Almost half, about 40% of American Jews. The Fox News and AP poll sampled from every state and had enough data out of New York to be able to report a New York level result, which showed a much lower rate of Jewish voters choosing Harris. I think probably reflecting the large Orthodox population in New York and possibly also reflecting the fact that that New York is considered a safe state for Democrats, and a voter there might feel more comfortable saying, allocating his or her vote as a form of protest. So, that's something that we've heard anecdotally, have included in our reporting anecdotally. Not sure that how we're ever going to be able to bear that out through data, but our reporting suggests that's a piece of the dynamic. So that's like how American Jews voted. Definite divides undetectable within our communities and across our communities. I think for many voters, certainly for folks in this room, and I think we've even maybe already seen the question appear in the chat, a big topic, a big interest in this election is what will happen in Israel, what will happen with the war there. While Americans were voting, Israel was undergoing its own leadership shakeup. And we now in America will have a president who has, he doesn't like war. He wants there not to be a war. He's made that very clear. He set out potentially a timeline for there not to be any more war in Israel. And that leaves lots of questions. So Ron, like, please explain to us where we are, what happened yesterday, if you can, and what you think we can expect to see, or the questions that you're going to seek to answer about the future of the U.S.-Israel relationship and the war in Gaza. But just a little question, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, I mean, part of the answer you can see in Netanyahu's very effusive congratulations to Trump today, where he says, calls his victory history's greatest comeback. You can see that Netanyahu wants to stay on Trump's good side. He wasn't on Trump's good side for a while because he congratulated Biden in 2020 in an election that Trump still insists that he won. And they kind of made up over the summer when Netanyahu was here to speak to Congress, and then he flew down to Mar-a-Lago and he met with Trump there. And so, there are both Biden and Harris and Trump all wanted the war to be ended quickly, but they wanted it ended under different circumstances. Trump just said, do what you have to do. That's his approach, whereas with Biden and Harris, there was concerns about ending it with a ceasefire that would bring out the hostages, and that would also allow in humanitarian assistance to the Palestinians in Gaza. But Trump just has also said that he has apparently also told Netanyahu that he wants the war done by the time he's inaugurated on January the 20th. So that'll give him time. He wants to build a legacy. He has said repeatedly he wants to expand the Abraham Accords. He wants a comprehensive peace in the Middle East, and he needs the war out of the way to do that. The question is Netanyahu susceptible to those pressures any more than he was under Biden? And it's hard to say, because there's Netanyahu has kind of made a career in Israel of challenging democratic administrations, whether it was Clinton, whether it was Obama, whether it's Biden, and he hasn't really faced a Republican administration except for Trump, and he had very friendly relations with Trump until the end. Now he's going to be facing a Trump administration that wants him to actually get things done that he might not, for domestic reasons, want done immediately. I just spoke to Ophir Gudelson, who is the chairman of the Unacceptable Movement, which is the kind of outside of Israel movement of Israelis who oppose Netanyahu. And he doesn't think that it's going to have any effect at all, because he says all of Netanyahu's pressures are domestic. He needs to pass the budget by the end of the year, and he needs the support of far right-wing parties, including the ones led by Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, and they are against any kind of exit from Gaza that doesn't leave in place the kind of situation they want, which from their perspective includes even resettling Gaza. So he still has, he's got a different president here, but he still has the same domestic pressures he always had. And then I think, so that's as far as that goes. I think that, so what he did yesterday, what you asked me about what he did yesterday, he fired Yoav Gallant, his defense minister. And that just shows that it's sort of that comes in the context of some of the pressures he's under. He's facing a huge scandal because somebody who worked for him has been implicated in releasing highly classified documents in order to help his case when he was trying to resist pressure to end the war. They not only released the this person allegedly not only released the highly classified documents, they even altered them. And the release of these documents, it could, according to the people who are bringing the charges, caused a damage to Israel. So that's a huge, huge issue. If this is linked to Netanyahu, he's linked to a scandal that would implicate him in espionage against his own country, weirdly enough. So that's that's what's on Netanyahu's mind right now. And so when he fired Gallant, he accused Gallant of being the person who leaks classified information. So you can see how this is already politically playing out in the Israeli field. Somebody asked about is he going to is somebody said Elia Feldstein did not work for Netanyahu. He was adjacent to Netanyahu. He worked for the he was Netanyahu tried to get him hired formally by the prime minister's office, but he couldn't clear security. But he was somebody who worked on behalf of Netanyahu, who his Netanyahu's officials say was somebody who was in the office helping them out. I don't know if he got I don't think he got a salary, but he was adjacent to Netanyahu, and of course a lot of this is contingent on whether Netanyahu knew about what was going on.
I'll just jump in and say that, like, all of this, everything that is playing on Israel is, in a time when there was not an election happening in the United States, would be much more heavily scrutinized and understood by folks sitting here. And I think this just kind of adds to the complex, chaotic climate where there may be a gap between what folks' instincts think might be happening and what may actually happen. And I just want to go back to something you said, Ron, to make sure we all understand it. You described, that Netanyahu has had a career of kind of sparring with Democratic administrations, and that I think is part of his success. And I think leading up to this election, I think a wide swath of American Jews were concerned about the whether there could be an attenuated relationship within coming out of the Democratic Party. But it sounds like you're saying, Ron, that there's a real question mark around what happens with the Republicans in charge here. That can you just kind of walk us through, like, what as Ophir was telling you, like, maybe he doesn't want to end the war, maybe he doesn't want to, his Netanyahu's responsibility is to his domestic pressures that might be at odds with what he's hearing from Trump. Like, what happens to the relationship in a case where Trump is frustrated by Netanyahu not giving him what he wants? Or am I jumping too far ahead? It seems like a possible scenario, but you tell me if that's connecting too many dots.
I think it's definitely a scenario. Somebody asked whether that Trump will stop funding for Ukraine, and so that's kind of wrapped into this question. He is coming from an isolationist tradition. He's moving from the internationalists that guided him in his first term, people like John Kelly and John Bolton and others, and he's attracting to him people who are more isolationist, like Tucker Carlson, and like his running mate, J.D. Vance. And these are people who think that Zelensky has mishandled the war. They don't want to dump more funding into Ukraine. They think it detracts from American funding, and there are more people like them in the congressional Republican Party than there were before, as we saw this year. And I think that, you have to take into account that this is a party that is more amenable to leveraging aid to Israel than it was before. It still has people who are still very much in favor of aid to Israel. Mike Johnson himself, what's going to happen in Ukraine is interesting because Mike Johnson became a convert over the summer to helping Ukraine. Mike Johnson is the Speaker of the House. If the Republicans replace the House, he'll still be somebody of enormous, keep the House, he'll still be somebody of enormous influence. So we don't know. But Kirsten Fontenrose, who worked on the Middle East in Trump's last National Security Council, said a few months ago at the Republican National Convention. She said, the difference between Trump and Biden, at the time Biden was the nominee, or the presumptive nominee, is that Biden will continue to have open tensions with Netanyahu, whereas Trump will keep them silent for 6 months. But she said she wouldn't give it longer than 6 months. And she said, if after 6 months, Netanyahu is getting in the way of what Trump wants his legacy to be in terms of peace in the Middle East and pulling America back from the dangers of getting into war, he will openly spar with Netanyahu. And that's going to be that'll be tough. It'll be interesting because it'll move Israel closer to being more like a Ukraine, where you can leverage aid in order to get what you want and to push Israel into accepting conditions that it doesn't want. And that's going to be much harder for Netanyahu to resist than it would be if a Democratic president was in power.
I mean, it sounds like what you're saying is that the old assumptions about how the Republican Party would approach Israel or approach international relations more generally are really contested at this time. And I think that's one of many question marks about what might happen in the future, and the degree to which using the past as a guide, even though we have had a Trump presidency in the past, may fall short, may just not give us the information that we want to have about what's going to happen in the future. So Andrew, you have started to, and as a newsroom, we've really committed, we're going to start, we're going to look ahead. I think we could be spending this whole conversation kind of quarterbacking what happened in the election. We're looking ahead. And Andrew, you've really started digging in on what has Trump said he will do specifically on issues that we know American Jews are invested in. And one of those that you've been covering on an ongoing basis is what's happening on college campuses, which I've seen a question about here. Can you tell us kind of, I know you're early in this reporting, but tell us where your reporting stands and what we know.
Yes, for sure. Hi, everyone. I don't know about the rest of you. I'm definitely operating on very little sleep today, so bear with me. But yes, this has been something that Trump was talking about on the campaign trail, dating back to the summer, to the beginning of the encampment movement. And he's become very interested in education in general. I mean, he talks a big game about wanting to abolish the entire Department of Education, but he has more specific plans, levers he can pull when it comes to higher ed. And so he said that he wants to deport any campus protesters, presumably including people who are protesting Israel. Some number of them are international students. Certainly not all of them are. So it's not clear exactly what he means when he's threatening deportation, although it does fall in line with one of his signature campaign promises, which is mass deportations, which he has vowed to carry out on day one of his new administration. The other levers he can pull that will certainly affect Jews on campuses in the larger campus environment. He's talked about wanting to change university accreditation systems to potentially leverage federal endowments that would be going to universities in order to drastically reinvent the ways that universities are structured. He wants to get rid of DEI programs, so-called critical race theory programs. These kinds of programs, as I've reported on before, when you are banning them in sort of dragnet style, you do often catch books or lessons on Jewish history and the Holocaust. So that is something I'll certainly be keeping my eye on if it advances in that line. But then there's also this general sense of wanting to put federal accreditation towards so-called pro-American courses and things that would sort of affect what we now think of as academic freedom or academic dissent. A lot of the big voices in the campus Israel protests have come from faculty or graduate students, and so it is certainly there's the possibility that if he can do maybe not all of these proposals right away, certainly abolishing the Department of Education will require an act of Congress, but if he can do at least some of them, then you could see universities sort of changing their structure or responding in kind to these kinds of threats and wanting to maybe more preemptively get ahead of moments of civil unrest than maybe they were willing to do before. I will also add that one of the favorite measures of levers of compliance that Jews and Jewish groups have tried to pull in order to keep in order to respond to the threat of campus anti-Semitism has been through the Department of Education filing Title VI civil rights complaints and similar lawsuits and things like that. And so if there is a drastically stripped down Department of Education, we could very easily imagine a future where it would become very difficult to use that kind of civil rights legislation to protect Jewish students on campus.
Andrew, I'd love to hear a little more about what we know about, and this can be for anybody to answer, what we know about Jewish groups' response to some of these proposals. I think widely Jewish groups and Jewish leaders have been very concerned about what is happening on campus and seeking redress, and also may not share. I think we don't know. I don't know the answer about whether these specific tactics to tackle campus climate for Jews and others are drawing appeal. You also mentioned immigration, obviously. What do we know about how Jewish groups are responding in this moment to what's coming ahead?
Yeah, we have seen, the idea to deport campus protesters did not come from Trump. Jewish groups had been proposing this for a while, many operating under the assumption that the campus protests are some, if not all, funded by foreign groups. And so that deportation has already been discussed as one way of trying to keep the peace on universities. Clamp down on campus protests is also a big factor in Project Esther, which is a sort of sister component to the Project 2025, the now infamous, blueprint that Trump staffers, many of whom plan to join his new administration, wrote down as part of their plans for what they would do if he were to be reelected. And so there are Jewish groups who might welcome some more stringent enforcement of campus protests, or who might not mind having not having Title VI to work with, because so far it's been proven somewhat ineffective. We have seen, there's just in the last day, obviously, there are a lot of these, congratulations messages coming in for Trump, and people are scrutinizing them closely. And we've seen Jonathan Greenblatt, the head of the Anti-Defamation League, issue a very fulsome congratulations to Trump, which is notable because during Trump's first term, the ADL was one of his most frequent critics. And then in the last 4 years has sort of walked back a lot of that criticism, has become more focused on things like campuses. The AJC has also congratulated Trump. And so we're seeing signs that some of the kind of major Jewish players in these spaces want to work with the Trump administration, want to or are hoping that he might help them look out for Jewish students, or try to keep some sort of calm on campuses. Which critics have classified as silencing dissent and silencing the right to protest. It's certainly going to be a volatile area to watch. We all remember the Black Lives Matter protests that happened while Trump was president, and the way that he deployed police forces to clamp down on those. And so this is an area that is sure to be of interest in the near future.
Ben and Ron, what else are you hearing?
Yeah, I think that's all correct. And something I want to note is that while you're asking that question, Philissa, I looked back a little bit at our reporting from the immediate aftermath of the election last year. And I will just note that in addition to being a pretty vocal critic of Trump, like Andrew was saying, in 2016 and 2017, the ADL saw a huge surge in donations after Trump's election to kind of do that work, or presumably because donors, thought it would be a good voice for that work. And I know that I can remember, I don't have it in front of me, but another group that's sure to kind of be in the spotlight now, which is HIAS, which is the Jewish Refugee Aid and Immigration Advocacy Group, also saw a huge surge in donations last time around. And it kind of put them in a weird spot, because a lot of what HIAS used to do before 2016 was work with the government to resettle refugees. After Trump instituted his travel ban in 2017, and after it was put into effect, following a series of court challenges, they couldn't really do that work anymore. There weren't a lot of refugees to resettle. And so they pivoted to doing a lot of legal work to kind of protect refugees and refugee rights. They opened offices in countries that had a lot of refugees in them, like Mexico and other nations, for the first time. And they kind of leveraged the surge in donations to do that work. And just more broadly, beyond the money question, if you think back to the first Trump administration, there was just a huge surge in Jewish activism, like Jewish progressive activism. The group If Not Now, which is usually focused on Israel and opposing a range of Israeli actions, pivoted toward Trump and opposing Trump and grew a lot during the first Trump administration. I saw that Rabbi Jill Jacobs, who's the head of Trua, which is a liberal rabbinic human rights group, posted a long thread on Twitter, or X now, this morning. She is unhappy with Trump's reelection, to put it lightly, but said, this is a moment to mobilize an activism. So I think we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see progressive Jewish groups, maybe some that have previously focused on harshly criticizing Israel, or you can use a stronger word if you'd like, opposing Israel, maybe pivot a little bit toward Trump. And a question in my mind, and I can't give the answer right now, is whether Jews on the right or who are more supportive of Trump are going to organize themselves more and kind of take a leaf out of the progressive movement's book to kind of count. So that's something that I'm going to be looking out for.
Ron, you're headed.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Ron.
No, I just spoke to Hias's president, Mark Hetfield, and he predicted again. He said, look, we actually came out stronger from the last Trump presidency. We're not worried about being dismantled. We'll just get money. I mean, a lot of the infrastructure that Ben was describing that Trump dismantled has been reassembled by the Biden administration in terms of refugee resettlement, and in terms of Hyatt being one of like about a dozen agencies that the US government works with to resettle. He expects that to be dismantled again. And that's not going to be great for refugees. He's very concerned about it, but he doesn't expect Hyas to be affected in terms of the institution itself. Although I did talk to him about threats by people like Stephen Miller, who advised Trump on immigration, to actually go after NGOs. There's people who are adjacent to Trump, people who, like the 2025 Project 2025, who Trump has disavowed, but is nonetheless made up of people who advised him in his last administration, have talked about tax audits of NGOs. So there's that fear might inhibit some of the activism that I think characterized the opposition to Trump in his first presidency, and including the Jewish opposition to Trump in his first presidency. In fact, I think that might be an explanation, we'll have to probe further as to why the ADL is more muted in its criticism of Trump. ADL and other organizations, you saw it also in the newspapers like the Washington Post and the Los Angeles Times declining to endorse Trump. Somebody's asking about Iran. That's a good question, because on the one hand, I think Trump is more encouraging of what Netanyahu wants to do with Iran, which is, as in the most recent retaliation, Netanyahu targeted only the military targets in Iran. And I want to, Netanyahu's people were saying that did not come, they emphasized that did not come because Biden had said, please, and he did say this, he said, please only attack the military targets, don't attack the oil, don't attack the nuclear. Netanyahu's people said that that was a purely Israeli decision because they didn't want to escalate. Nonetheless, Trump has criticized Biden for making that restriction, don't attack the nuclear sites. And so on the one hand, yes, if Israel ever gets to the point where it needs to escalate and it feels it needs to escalate and attack the nuclear sites, it now has a president who won't object. The issue is, though, that that there are people who say that that Israel can't really go after Iranian nuclear sites without American assistance, and that might actually be direct military assistance, like cover from American combat aircraft, or it could mean bunker busting bombs. Israel does not have enough bunker busting bombs to reach some of the nuclear sites which are hidden under mountains in Iran. And so does Trump provide that? And, you know, I tried to get people who were surrogates for Trump. I tried to get the Trump campaign to say, because the Harris campaign effectively said, you know, if it comes to that, we will be there for that kind of assistance. I could not get the Trump administration to say that. So you have like a situation where Trump says, do what you need to do, but he's kind of tacitly saying, but I'm not necessarily going to help you do that if you need my help. So that's, I think, that is where Iran stands right now.
And I think that leads us into kind of looking at who do we know will be part of Trump's administration. I think part of what you're describing, Ron, is you know, we know that that folks who were there in the administration last time, many of them have openly, you know, distanced themselves from Trump, argued against his being elected, and so we don't really know who's gonna be his inner circle on making those kinds of decisions. I think we have, you know, some hints here and there, but there's a lot of open questions. Like what do we know about the people who will be making that kind of call, and how are we gonna, when will we know more?
Well, I mean, you know, I was saying in our meeting earlier today, I mean, classically, you have a transition team ready in place, and they do. Supposedly both sides have a transition team in place, and you actually know within a couple of days of who's likely to be nominated. Sometimes the campaign will officially say, we're going to nominate this person for Attorney General, and this person for Secretary of State, and this person for Secretary of Defense. And it has to happen pretty fast because you want those, yeah, you know, at least under the traditional way, you want those meetings to go on with the predecessor administration where you can coordinate. That was a tradition that occurred when there was kind of like a broad agreement about the goals of American foreign policy and domestic policy. Now you have two vastly different visions. And so what happened in 2016 is that Chris Christie, who is a traditionalist, you know, 2 terms as governor of New Jersey, guy who's deeply wonky about government, got that thick book with all the people he wanted in the new administration, and he was assigned to do that because Trump said you do that. And then Jared Kushner literally took that book, took that binder, and threw it in a trash can. Literally, I mean, that's what's described. And so, and then it was like a while before you knew who was going to be handling what in the next Trump administration. The Obama administration people had prepared briefings with PowerPoints. They had rooms reserved in the old executive office building to bring in Trump people and say, this is where we are on this situation, and the Trump people didn't turn up to a lot of the briefings. So, I mean, it's like that, which is to say, we don't know yet. We just can't know yet until it becomes more consolidated, and it might take a while for that to happen.
But
And what happens like in these next 2 months, or however many weeks it is,
76 days.
76 days, can there still be action on priorities that the Biden administration has had, or are we going to see, is the window closed?
No, absolutely. The president is the president. I mean, you know, the president is the president until January the 20th. Congress is Congress until January the 3rd. So there are things that the president can do through executive action. And, you know, famously, this has affected Israel twice directly, the lame duck period. In 1988, Ronald Reagan, who was retiring and who didn't want his successor, George H.W. Bush, to enter office fighting Israel or fighting the pro-Israel community on an issue. So he gave the green light for the US for the first time to deal directly with the Palestinian Liberation Organization. And it was a lame duck, and Reagan was perceived as an incredibly pro-Israel president, a very popular president. So there was no room to really complain about the elevation of the PLO. And then in 2016, the Obama administration allowed through the Security Council a resolution condemning Israel's settlement project. Now, what was interesting about that in terms of what might happen now is that there were 2 cabinet ministers or members of the cabinet who advised Obama not to do that, who said, do not do anything on the settlement, block the resolution, veto them. One of them was Joe Biden. The other one was Jack Lew. But Joe Biden's rationale was, we don't want to alienate our friends in the Jewish community, in the pro-Israel community. This is a bad idea. And so that man who objected in December 2016 is now the person pulling the levers in 2024. Maybe he's changed his mind. Maybe he's become so incredibly frustrated he's going to do something to force Israel's hand. But it's notable that in 2016 he was one of the people who are playing it very cautious over how an administration should conduct itself in the lame duck period.
I want to invite, we've got 15 more minutes. I want to invite other questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat there. We've had many great questions, and I want to surface another one here. The reporter who's been out in front for us tackling the question of Christian nationalism and its influence in a Trump administration and its relationship to American Jews. That's Asaf Ilyas Shalev. You can read his second story yesterday about how Christian nationalists of different stripes think about religious minorities, including Jews, in their vision for a future America. But we have a question about how will the Christian nationalist movement impact policies that are put into action. I think related to that, how will Jews be affected? But I think even stepping back, like, is this a moment where we are, to what is the role of Christian nationalism in this moment, and what do we know about that? And I'm wondering, Ben, if that's something that you could speak to briefly.
Sure. So Christian, I'm just going to do a quick definition, and it's going to be a probably simplistic one by its nature, just because I want to summarize. Christian nationalists believe in one way or another. There's like Philissa said, there's a spectrum of ideologies within that label, but believe that Christians should have dominion over the government and the country, and that basically means that our laws and the way our government functions should be informed by Christianity, Christian religion, Christian values, and that we should be like a really just like explicitly Christian country, right? So Christian nationalist thinkers and rank and file Christian nationalists make up a key segment of Trump's base. If you ask that question, right, should our government be run according to Christian values or whatever, a version of that question, a large percentage of Republicans, I'm not sure a majority, but a big percentage say yes. So it's definitely one of the things that has animated Trump's base and driven his victory this time. What's interesting to me, first of all, is that Trump is famously not a very religious person personally, and the way Christian nationalists look at him is that they analogize him to Cyrus, the Persian king Cyrus or Koresh in the Bible, who was himself not personally religious, but proclaimed that Jews could go back to the land of Israel. And Christian nationalists view Trump in that way, and they see him and his administration as a vessel to accomplish their goals. I was watching a video of Charlie Kirk, who's like a leading Trump activist and supporter, who he is a religious Christian and talks about Christianity all the time. And at one of his rallies, somebody asked him, like, how can I as a Christian support Trump? And he said, remember, you're not just voting for Trump, you're voting for the 5,000 people that Trump is going to appoint in his administration. And I think that that's the way a lot of Christian nationalists view this, is like, this is a vehicle for them to accomplish their goals. Obviously, one of those was repealing Roe versus Wade, which the three justices who Trump appointed in his last term, passed through in 2022. And there's a lot of other policies that they want to push forward, both on reproductive rights, on LGBTQ issues. A lot of them want to institute prayer in public life in a way that it isn't now. And so, did that answer your question? I feel like maybe I answered a different question than the one you asked.
No, I think I think this is on everyone's mind, and I think it's a real question of a confusion. I think the confusion that you described, well, Trump himself does not appear to, be animated by religious fervor. what is the connection between him and this movement. And I think that you helped with that.
So I do want to add 2 points quickly. J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect, is converted to Catholicism, is a devout Catholic, or at least like a religiously involved Catholic, and speaks about his Catholicism. And so that certainly informs his approach to life and to government and to his work. So he is a religious Christian. And the second thing is that, regardless of Trump's personal religious practice, this is something he's embraced. It's not just like a one-way street. Christian nationalists like him for the reasons that I outlined, and he likes them, both because they support him, but also I think he sees them as partners in what he's trying to accomplish. So he's spoken at Christian rallies. He's met publicly and privately with a range of pastors. So I mean, he's in on, to that extent, he's also in on this partnership.
I want to ask about some other people that we're probably going to hear a lot more from. I see a question about Jewish Democrats, but before we move to them, I want to ask you, Andrew, if you can talk a little bit about the relationship between Trump and Elon Musk, one of his biggest funders in this cycle, someone he has, I think, said he would at least give some responsibility in kind of reviewing how the government works and spends its money. And tell us what we ought to know about Elon Musk and that relationship and the questions that you're taking a look at on there.
Sure. So when I'm thinking about the people in Trump's orbit who Jews, ought to know and should be paying attention to, Elon Musk is very high on that list. As you said, he was a major driver behind Trump's campaign, took over most of the ground game operations, spent millions and millions of his own fortune to get him elected, and has been promised some sort of government efficiency bureau role in which he could cut trillions from the federal budget, which could impact a lot of federal programs that affect Jews, et cetera. But we also look at Elon because he seems like the next iteration of what was a defining feature of Trump's first term, which was the rise of white nationalism and Charlottesville and QAnon and all these other kind of assorted forces that were coming out of the woodwork, Proud Boys, et cetera, and threatening Jews in very violent ways. During Musk's ownership of the social network X, which used to be Twitter, it has become really one of the world's largest platforms for white nationalist and neo-Nazi content. There is very little moderation on the site now, and there are all sorts of anti-Semitic memes, pro-Hitler memes, racist memes being spread there on a daily basis. And it's still, as of now, being used as a semi-official communications channel for governments and media outlets and all this sort of thing. And so his stewardship of that and the fact that he himself has shown an embrace of certain ideas that percolate with the Great Replacement theory or similar kind of far-right mindsets. The idea of him being in a Trump administration would certainly be an area of concern, I would think, for Jews, both because how what the communication platform of X might become with this very friendly, cozy relationship to Trump, and also about what he might do with the levers of the federal government behind him and his hundreds of billions of dollars as well. Also looking maybe not, but another figure of some notoriety to Jews is Robert Kennedy Jr., who of course was the third party candidate who dropped out of his race, endorsed Trump. Trump has promised him control of some sort of portfolio of health-related concerns, probably including public health. We know that RFK Jr. is, famously a vaccine skeptic, and in the last couple of years, he has publicly compared vaccine mandates to the Holocaust. He has spread a theory that the COVID vaccine was engineered to avoid Ashkenazi Jews or something like that. There was some involvement there. I don't know if I got it quite right, but hard to keep track of. So him in charge of any sort of vaccine or health program would certainly be something we would want to keep our eye on as well.
And then let's go back to Democrats, because the new government will be a Republican administration, and the Democrats will at least at the executive level be the opposition or the resistance, and we'll need to figure out a strategy for going forward. And obviously, today is not the day when they are announcing that strategy. I think we're only just now hearing from hearing a concession speech. But like who can we expect? And this can be for anyone, but Ron, I'm sure you've got these people top of mind. Who can we expect to be the Jews? I guess we talked about Jews or folks of Jewish interest in a Trump administration. Jews among the Democrats who are gonna stand out right now. I think we saw a comment that notes Schiff. We've all Schiff, who led the impeachments in the House, now has a Senate seat in California. We all are thinking about Josh Shapiro, who did not become the vice president pick, but will remain the governor in Pennsylvania. Who else is there? Who should we be looking out for?
I think that yeah, in terms of like Adam Schiff, he's definitely going to be prominent. He is he led the impeachment hearings, or one of the impeachment hearings. He participated in the other. He was a top figure on the January 6th thing. Commission that is going to set up a conflict with Trump because he's been elevated to the Senate. Trump has said he wanted to prosecute Adam Schiff. That's going to be interesting to watch. So somebody else mentioned Josh Shapiro. Very, I think that he comes out of this. He's got huge approval ratings in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris says, I mean, there is no strategy yet, because I think Democrats are for once actually in disarray, just as we like to always say, Democrats are in disarray now. They really are. So he's somebody who just has a proven ability, and he emphasized this right after his election. He has a proven ability to get Republicans to vote for him, and this was something that Kamala Harris tried very hard to happen, and it looks like it didn't really happen. The other figures we should watch. Elissa Slotkin looks close to possibly winning by a hairbreadth the Senate seat in Michigan. She is another figure. If she wins, she'll be perceived as somebody who is able to win a purple state in a year that was not good for Democrats. Same as Shapiro. She comes from a national security background. She's an internationalist. What we're seeing here is just like the Democrats are becoming the party where you've got they're not entirely internationalist. You do have a leftist rump, not even a rump. You have a substantial minority with them among the leftists in the party that reject a robust American role in the world, but they're more internationalists. I think in a few years, you're going to find more internationalists in the Democrats than among Republicans, and that's where Jewish figures like Elissa Slotkin, who are have a very pro-Israel record, are going to feature prominently. So I mean, I think that's important, because you're going to have two battles taking place within both parties over the next few years, between isolationists and internationalists among Republicans, and between people who are hypercritical of Israel and have an emphasis on human rights that they think means that should be the American assistance to Israel should be leveraged, and people like Elissa Slotkin, but people like Brad Schneider and Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Richie Torres. It's not just Jewish Democrats, it's other Democrats as well, who really believe in the U.S.'s relationship. And so you're going to have this sort of twin battle taking place on both sides, and those are the things to watch out for. The other ways to watch, it's very, very close, is Jackie Rosen in Nevada. It's still too close to be determined, but she has emerged as a leading figure on combating anti-Semitism, on creating actually bipartisan alliances, working with a very conservative Oklahoma Senator James Lankford. And so that kind of relationship between Jackie Rosen and James Lankford, that's the kind of template I think that the pro-Israel community, the Jewish community, is going to want to see more of in the next administration, in the next incoming years. Sorry. Yeah.
My favorite Jewish stat from the election last night was that now that Josh Stein is the governor of North Carolina, 3 U.S. governors, sitting U.S. governors, are Jewish guys named Josh. Between him, Josh Shapiro, and Josh Green, the governor of Hawaii.
Right.
I think that I see at least a couple Joshes on this call going like this. So, but it is, I mean, it is a remarkable thing, right? It is a remarkable thing that in this moment of such great upheaval, open questions, real concerns from all sides, you know, to note, as you just did, Andrew, that we did have, we did see a Jewish governor, a mainstream pro-Israel centrist Democrat, Jewish Democrat elected in North Carolina. You know, that there's stuff happening below the presidency that means that there will be just a great deal to continue to watch as the new contours of governance in this country get defined. I'm just scanning to see if there are other essential questions that we should wedge into the last 2 minutes. I do think we've covered the biggies, and I will just underscore, like, we're here. We have only just started to apply our journalism to all of these questions. They will occupy us endlessly. We know that you will come along for that ride and tell us what we need to answer and how we can do it better. And we appreciate that. So I really want to thank everyone for being here today. Thank you, Ron and Ben and Andrew, for extremely cogent and insightful comments after a very long night, and for all of your work. And please stay in touch, everyone. Continue to tell us what we can tell you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.